Can we close the doors, please, so that we can get underway? Those doors at the back. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, which is about Asia's leadership agenda, which surprised me because I didn't realize there was one. So perhaps our opportunity this afternoon is actually to create one. I hope in that sense it will be a learning session rather than a learned session. And the panel are geared up, I must say, to deliver, I hope, some surprises and some insights and some inspiration in alignment with the Horasis vision. My name is Richard Hames. I'm the founder of the Centre for the Future, which is based in Australia, although we work all over the world. The object of the organization is to redesign or reinvent systems that are no longer working for the human family as a whole. And one of those is leadership. When I was born, which was 73 years ago, yes, I know you're thinking, my God, you don't look that old. 73 years ago, there were about 2 billion people in the world. And today, there are just over 7.6 billion people. So the context has shifted for everything. And yet, many of the systems that we still assume to be relevant are actually those systems designed perhaps 100 or 200 years ago, which are no longer working for everyone at all. The context has changed, leadership has changed. Leadership certainly is not the same today as it was when I was a boy. Indeed, many people today are lamenting the lack of leadership in the world. What do they mean by that? A lack of leadership. Does leadership need redefining to take into account the profound changes that have taken place in our world over the past century or so? And if so, how can we here today define it so that it is less Eurocentric and more relevant to us here in Asia? Over the past 75 years, there has certainly been a shift of entrepreneurial energy from the West to the East. There's no denying that. And as extreme right-wing oligarchs encircle the world today, the orthodox Western worldview, based on scientific realism, Cartesian logic, Western cosmology, and the notion of competition, is rapidly losing its appeal, as well as, I suggest, its moral authority. The twin pillars of the West's ascendancy after the Industrial Revolution were democracy and capitalism. I've just come from a session on governance, and I was surprised and intrigued to note that the notion of sovereignty wasn't even raised, and yet we have an assumption about national sovereignty that we believe to be inviolable. We can't change it. But just like the nation state, which was only invented a few hundred years ago, if we invented it, we can change it. So everywhere we look today, if you look at democracy, it's actually in a shambles. Nowhere is democracy working as it was intended. And capitalism has become so tied to an authoritarian neoliberal ideology that it's now becoming more toxic to more people than ever before. So what do we do in terms of leadership in that kind of context? In these circumstances, is Asia the solution? Can Asia provide a new paradigm of leadership based upon an economics of empathy and compassion and environmental stewardship? Can it provide a new societal vision, sustaining Asia's rich plurality of cultures, rather than becoming simply a bland monoculture such as the West has become? And if so, what will that take? is leadership in Asia a collective noun? In acknowledging the communitarian impulse in many Asian societies, should our appreciation of leadership shift from the all-knowing individual exercising enormous power in different situations to a more collaborative community of mind that puts our relationships with each other and our relationship with the planet, which we need for our survival, before parochial and commercial self-interest? And if so, how should leaders therefore adjust, adapt, and evolve a world that works for everyone? Are we ready to do that? Or are we in Asia still enthralled to Western notions of linear progress and economic growth that used to work but are now failing humanity? Worse still, are our minds occupied by decadent militaristic empires and competitive economics to the extent that we are trapped in a gridlock from which there can be no escape without heretical thinking and massive civil disobedience? In this context, admittedly provocative, our questions take on new meanings. While any fresh insights could form the basis for an entirely new reality and set of imperatives, as well perhaps as a beacon of human advancement such that the world might sit up and take notice. For that is what I believe we are here to think about and deliberate upon. The panel has been asked to consider two questions, but I don't want us to forget the context I've just set, because these questions raise enormous moral and ethical dimensions that perhaps we would normally gloss over in that context. The first is, what can leaders do to bridge the growing political, economic, social, and technological divides in our society? And the second question is, what will it take to be a responsible and effective leader in the world we have created or are creating? Now, to help us reflect on these focusing questions today, I am humbled to be chairing a group of highly distinguished and diverse people. Should you care to discover more about their achievements, their qualifications, their positions, then you can damn well ask them after the session. I'm not going to introduce them in that sense. I'm far more interested in what they think and what their passions are and how they're going to argue the case for leadership today here. And so to that end, I'm going to introduce each one to you separately with just a few words, only a few words. And they are going to respond with some insights and some comments with just a few words. And I've promised them that I'm a tyrant as a chair, and so I'm going to keep the timing very tight indeed.
Wonderful.
And then we'll converse a little bit, and then I'd like to open up to everybody, because I'd like this to be a genuine dialogue and strategic conversation rather than presentations from the learned. I'm only in this chair because I accidentally wrote a book called The 5 Literacies of Global Leadership, and Frank thought it would be a good idea if I chaired this session. I know nothing about leadership apart from trying to lead myself. One of the people that I have been inspired by just recently in getting to know her fairly deeply, or as deeply as I can do through the internet, is Abba here, who is inspired by diversity of gender, diversity of generations, and diversity of geography. And what particularly appealed to me about her work is how she leverages the power of culture, especially in Asia, but by looking at permutations of Western science and Eastern wisdom. And that intrigues me because very often that's a dimension which is totally left out of our conversations, especially when men are having the conversation. Abba, over to you.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay. You are now.
Yeah, now. Thank you, Grace. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Richard, for that introduction. Richard mentioned about the Western way of leadership, and we are in Asia right now. How many of us have read books like How to Do Business in Asia, How to Communicate in Asia, How to Stand in Asia, How to Sit in Asia? Yeah, and this is done by people who have visited Asia for a couple of years, and they scratched the surface, and they were telling people in the West, this is how you should do business in Asia. However, that's not how it works. And I'm sure when they come back to do business, they figured that the hard way, that this is not the way it works, right? We in Asia, I mean, we are politically different, we are socially different, we are culturally different, we are morally different, we are spiritually different, and we have now come to a point where we have to embrace this difference and then bring together what the West has given to us in terms of leadership. What we have adopted from the West is democracy and capitalism. It works very well for us, right? All the money and material things and all these nice things that are going on sounds great, very aspirational. But when we go out to do that, it doesn't really work very well because, you know, our moral fabric is very different from what we are learning from this, because this is all based, capitalism is based on human need or greed or even violence, competition, or for that matter, individualism, right? And then we come to our side, because our culture says all this is the cause of unhappiness. Now, what do we do with that? So if I'm working with my friends in the West, we are really aggressive. We can go like bulls into the place and get things moving, and, you know, we punch into the spaces and say, okay, we can get this done. But come to Asia and we have to figure how to get things moving. Especially this kind of systems or the way of thinking or approach has not really worked very, very well, despite the fact that we have talent over here, but we have a gap over here which needs to be bridged in terms of how we can put these two together. That's when the Western science and the Eastern spirituality comes into being, that we are all at the bottom of the the space. We are very clearly all individuals with the same kind of needs, and we have to understand that this part of the world is now an open field. It's a play field for people to exercise leadership. We only see political leadership over here. We don't see business leaders, except, you know, you hear things from China, and, you know, you have a couple of things coming from some nook and corner here and there. But if we were to define leadership in Asia, there's very little to talk about and very little to see or hear or watch. And, you know, I have been lucky. I mean, this is my friend Grace from Indonesia. We started something called the Asia Leaders Consortium in March 2018, exactly for this reason, that we need to sit down. May. Okay. So we have to sit down and deliberate and have a dialogue and have to understand how things work over here. And this gap, how do we bridge this gap is the question. So when we look at the cultures over here, how many communities do we have over here? How many countries are there? How many ethnicities? How many religions? How many ways we do things? And if we were to ask a business house to come and understand each one of them, we are literally putting our hand into something called in India we have this whole version of saying that we can't really find what's going on, and we keep searching. You know, there's a Hindi quote over there, which I'm not saying this now because most people will not understand. We have to figure a way to do this. So the cultures is what needs to be looked into. Now, if I say go to each culture and figure what to do, I think everybody's going to ask me to get out of this room and say, no, we don't find this appealing enough. This is not effective. This is not practical. So what is that we need to do? We need to understand Asia is a space for survivors. We don't always go by the rules. We don't always go by the book. We sometimes go by our spiritual understanding. We sometimes go by our social conduct, because our motivation for work and our social conduct are two different things. We don't go to work for the same thing as people do in the West. So when we bring in the Western version of working over here, most people are, at the end of the day, now we can learn this from the West, that they are now learning to de-learn, de-stress, calm down, come back to the human way of being. Stop being robots. Stop being so, individualistic. Stop being all about material. So we can learn that because we already have that stuff over here. Right?
Right.
Yeah, we do. We do have that stuff over here, except that we don't talk about it as much as we should. And we haven't gone to the point of exercising that within our day-to-day lives or business lives or the way things should work in our corporate environment. So whenever we talk of our corporate environments, we are pretty much told that, business and emotions don't go together. But let me ask everybody over here, there's the new kind of intelligence that the West is talking about. We call it emotional intelligence. Right? It's very popular. I'm an emotional intelligence coach, and I talk to a lot of leaders and directors and everybody and keep talking to them, figuring out where they're lacking there in emotion, because it's a very basic thing that when we are talking to people, we need to understand how people function in this part of the world. So functionality, productivity, processes, how we think, how we move, how we function, how we are motivated, all those things are as important as the theory of leadership, if at all. So I love the idea of leadership. I'm very happy with learning all that. I do it myself, and when I go back to India, my country, I figure it's difficult.
Thank you so much. You see, immediately we move to a different space, or potentially a different space, for two reasons in terms of what you've said.
Yeah.
The first is, Abba is talking about a pluriverse, whereas normally we talk about the universe.
Yes.
And, a one-size-fits-all. And the second thing which intrigues me about what Abba is saying is the fact she's talking about transcending opposites and extremes rather than choosing either or, which again, the Descartesian view, the Descartesian logic is either or, red, white, well, it's red and blue, isn't it, politically?
Black and
on
white.
or off, black and white. So immediately we're moving into a new potential space for leadership. Thank you so much. I'm going to move to Anit here. 3 words for him: technology, sports, and music. He is the lead guitarist for the Amazon band. Let's hear it for the Amazon band.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Not that I know what the Amazon band is. My eldest son is the lead viola in the Munich Radio Orchestra, and I was a composer of music, so we have something in common. I think you noted that already. He's into hacking ideas which leverage tech to solve complex business problems, so he's a man after my own heart. Anit.
Hi everyone, very good afternoon to all of you. I am Anit and I am from India. And I'd like to get straight to the point because, as Richard pointed out, he's a tyrant for timekeeping. 60%, guys, 60% of the global economic growth in the world is being fueled by Asian economies. We contribute to approximately 29 to 30% of the global GDP, which is expected to rise to 40% by 2030. We have the largest demographic dividend at our disposal. And I think it's extremely poignant that we are here to discuss the aspects of how do we shape Asia's leadership so that we are able to expect and to nourish this growth engine. I am from India, which is a land which cherishes its mythology a lot. And I feel it's extremely poignant that I bring forth a 4-point story which is based on Indian mythology. The story starts when Lord Ram gets his wife abducted by the evil Lord Ravana. Now Lord Ram tells his faithful disciple Hanuman, to go ahead and bring Sita back. Hanuman does not know how to do it. While he has the intrinsic capabilities, he's worried if he'll be able to defeat Lord Ravana. This is where Ram steps in and motivates and helps him get the job done. This, I think, is one of the most critical aspects of being a true leader, the ability to motivate and inspire your fellows as well as your subordinates. Moving on, when Hanuman returns, he tells Lord Ram about the fact that he burned down the entire city of Lanka because his tail was set on fire. Now, Ram could have been happy that the job was done, but did he do that? He went ahead and reprimanded Hanuman for not doing the right thing. And I think while we have a lot of we are the cusp of global supremacy, we have a lot of opportunities, it is extremely important that our leaders need to do the right thing and need to tell each other how to go in the right space. The third story that I'd like to talk about is the fact that when Lord Lakshman, who is the brother of Lord Ram, has a mysterious injury, and it can only be cured by a magical drug called the Sanjeevani. Hanuman, who has been guided and motivated by Lord Ram, goes ahead and finds the drug, but he's awaiting further instructions. Now, that is when Ram realizes that it is important to ensure that your fellow leaders not only learn to manage, but start thinking on their own feet. That's when he gets himself mysteriously abducted, right? And he finds out, and Lord Hanuman does not have any other option, but he goes ahead, leads an army, and gets Lord Ram back. And that is the fact that where we are here, that it's not only important to build true leaders, but it's extremely important to build a leadership pipeline. And that, I think, is something that we all need to focus on. As a wise man once said, a true leader is not one who makes millions, but he needs to know how to make most millionaires. And that's where I lead it to other people.
Thank you very much. I mean, that too has now added a third dimension to the two things I pointed out. Unbeknownst to you, but what the tool Anita's used there to get his points across, of course, is story, narrative. The importance of narrative for leaders is absolutely critical. And if we've got a lack of leadership in the world at the moment, it's probably because we haven't got a narrative, a future narrative, that actually fits for the younger generation. I think a lot of times the younger generation are stymied by the fact that people of my age aren't getting out of the way quickly enough, which is a problem. But the second thing is that there is no relevant story that fits their needs. So thank you for actually approaching the whole topic like that. Now we come to the local boy, Tang, here, who is incredible. We had an incredible conversation the other day when I was trying to catch up with who my panelists were, and some of them have been quite naughty and not replying to emails, but I won't go there. But Tang took the time out to have a conversation with me, and it was marvelous. And we noted very much the potential for change and leadership in Vietnam. And he's extraordinary. For me, you actually represent the new Vietnam very much in terms of spirit and integrity and direction. He mentors startups. He's founded a global community empowering young people to step into the world with the essential skills they need to be able to make their mark. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you for your very nice word, kind word, Richard. I'm humble to receive that. Back to the global youth community. So for me, the thing here is, if you share yourself as a leader, you have to look at around you, who is your follower, and if you have no follower, think again, are you a leader or not? So I have seen one of my staff. So he's really good at his work. He performed quite well. But when I promote him into the manager, the performance dropped down dramatically. And I found out that it's not about the skill that he has, but about the mindset that is stick in his mind. And I found that it's not just him, but a lot of people around me. So what we do is we create an environment where they can sit comfortably, share what they good at, or bad at, and they experience from that. They challenge from each other. They don't really care which their position. And we create a chain for them to get approach training, even in here or in other countries in Asia. So luckily, I have a network in Asia as I mentor around Asia. When so I connect them with the startup that I mentor. So they got a chance to experience the same position, but with different culture, different environment. And when they come back, they do things totally different. And they say, well, at first I thought that if I am a manager, I can order whatever I want. I can just ask them the request and they do the thing that I want. But it's not about that. The employee or the partner, when they partner with you, it's about the economic relationship. And if they want to quit, easy. It's not just like you can request them to do everything they want, you want. So when I start that movement, a lot of people at first they are doubtful of what we did, but then we attract from 100 people, 200 people, 1,000. Now we have more than 6,000 members from all around the world. We got backed up by the U.S. Consulate General. And luckily, I was in India last year to receive the Global EduTech Leadership Award. And this is very, very honor for me. And for me, if you think you are a leader and you don't put your soul into your partner or your employee situation and look at that experience, how they feel, what they did, and help them to grow, you're not really a leader. The leader should be the one that lead by example, that can collaborate with others and help everyone go with them, improve daily, and achieve the ultimate goal that we set from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. But what you haven't said, and what you told me the other day, so I'm going to tell everybody, is the humility in leadership too, and the importance of sharing and cooperation.
Yes.
Absolutely critical. So thank you. That's another dimension to our new space.
Yeah.
Now, Grace has been very naughty. She didn't tell me, and neither did Abba, that these two are in cahoots. They didn't tell me that. I didn't know that. That's
naughty.
That's very naughty. But Grace is very much into social and community development. And that's the reason she claims she became the founder of Ambassador and CEO Club. I'm intrigued to know more.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Grace Abandar from Indonesia. Just like what Richard just mentioned, that I'm the founder of Ambassador and CEO Club. This is actually what I call leading like a humanitarian, right? Yeah. Well, some years ago, I read an article by Lisa K. Solomon on how a leader can change a society. Leaders of the world and of any country play most important role to achieve genuine happiness of its people. She said in the article that most important character of a good leader is that they must be compassionate, a personality of caring about people. Leading like a humanitarian means taking responsibility for how we connect our work, regardless of our job, to a meaningful purpose beyond growth and profitability. Leading like a how should I say that, humanitarian.
Next time you say I'll help you, humanitarian.
Yes, is a mindset and set of practices, not a single defined position. But try asking a simple question of our organization: how does our work positively impact the world around us? And can we do better? This mindset have been my mindset, how us as CEOs or leaders can have positive impact to the world around us. Then in 2015, I started an initiative called Ambassador and CEO Club. It is not a club like a club. I mean, there is no membership fee, no. But it is an initiative to involve ambassadors as leaders in the embassies and CEOs as leaders in the corporation to enhance people-to-people relations and to be involved in community development. So far, we have implemented some programs, especially in Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia, and also in other parts of Indonesia. In Jakarta, we helped the old Jakarta governor to build 200 community centers only in 2 years, time. As individual, we might only do small contribution to our society, but if we do it together, we can do bigger thing and have bigger impact. Of course, it is easier said than done. You must experience that. But I'm sure as long as there is a will, there is a way. Just like an African proverb says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's it, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. I'm adding to this. This is marvelous because this is not prepared. You realise, I'm briefed by what they're going to say, but a little bit at least. But this is absolutely marvelous. There are two things that come across in what you're saying. The first is the realization that if we look at the leadership literature, 99% of it comes from men.
Right.
Yeah? And 80% of that comes from America or England. It's about time we did something about that. Mm-hmm. We need to change the literature. And the second thing that's important for me about what you've said is the notion that in order to change leadership models, we need to get to incumbent leaders, people who are already in those positions. This was brought home to me by a great friend of mine, Nick Gowing. You may have heard of Nick Gowing. In fact, I think he's been at previous Horasis events. He was senior news anchor for BBC World for a long time. And over the past 3 to 4 years, he's been going around the world interviewing incumbent leaders in government and major corporations. And everywhere, off the record, our leaders, or so-called leaders, are saying, I'm lost, there must be more to life than this, the pressure is too much, we know the system is not within our control any longer, but we feel powerless to do anything about it. In that kind of situation, the imperative to change the leadership model becomes absolutely critical. So thank you for raising that. Toshi, from Japan. Toshi, as you would expect from a leader in Japan, is concerned with technology. And Toshi's technology is to do with the Internet of Things and the extraordinary things his company is doing in terms of understanding offline behavior. And his company, I don't know how to pronounce Uneri, but it means in cooperation, in flow, in cooperation.
That's right, yes.
Over to you.
Okay, the Uneri means the big wave in Japanese word, actually. My name is Hidetoshi Uchiyama. I'm a CEO of Uneri, coming from Japan. My company, as your introduction, operates the IoT marketing platforms such as the smart vending machines and the smart retail stores. And we have already deployed 1 million stores all around Japan. And apart from my business, regarding the Asian leadership agenda, this is the fact about Japan. It's totally different from India or the other countries. Japan is much, much more beyond in terms of the population aging, right? So right now, is more than the population aging rate is 27%, meaning that 1/4 of the Japanese people are more than 65 years old. If you go to Japan, then you can easily see the more than 65 years old. So that causes a lot of problems. It's totally different from other Asian countries. So the good thing is that our industries, most of the industries are very big. But the problem is they don't grow anymore. most of the industry don't grow. We have confronted this problem for the past 30 years. So for the past 30 years, a lot of the management people have struggled with inventing a new type of organizations. And recently, we have seen the light of finding a new type of organization, which is called teal organization. That concept is derived from the Frederic Laloux. He's an advisor, executive advisor to a lot of global corporations. That concept is very unique. There are no managers. They shouldn't be managers. We divide a lot of small teams and let the team to decide a lot of things. They have authority of decisions. There are no managers, no area managers. The only management and the teams. That kind of team. Some companies has already started that kind of organization, and it succeeded recently. And my company, we launched my company 3 years ago, and adapting to that, we have already adopted that T organization in my organization, and it works. For example, my company doesn't have any business plan. We go for public in 2 years in Japanese stock market, but we don't have business plan. We don't have any sales target. We don't have any profit target, but we go for public. I think it's possible. We are trying. That means that our employee doesn't have any sales target or any profit target. We are challenging that kind of organization in a non-growth market. I think to answering your questions, the one is the leader can do, what leader can do to bridge. The answer to the question is that we have to set up an evolutionary purpose to show the objective of our existence that the leader should do. And the second, to answer your second question, the responsible in business and society, is to change our organization into the new type of organization. No competitions and no hierarchy, to the collaborative and the team-based and the democratic-based organization. That's the answer to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toshi. The thing I learned pick up from what you've said is not just the cooperative side of what you're talking about, but in terms of leadership, we need, because the context has changed, we need to go back to first principles and not take baggage with us necessarily. Now, there is someone on the panel today that I haven't met, that didn't respond to emails. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. All I do know is that he's the deputy CEO of a very large company in Malaysia and a very busy man. So, Kanesen, you're going to have to explain who you are and why are you here?
Okay, thank you. My apologies for being late.
It's all right.
Didn't expect the weather to be there. But I'm very worried about his business model because politicians will be very worried about him because there's no managers. There's absolutely no way they're going to control that. I'm here because I've been part of Horasis for some time now, and I've been in urban transportation and cross-border business. My presence here is, I think, to add something unbelievable, in my personal opinion, happened in my country, and it's about leadership change. 61 years of rule, longest running party in the world, was toppled, on May 9th this year, and I never expected that. I think there are a couple of lessons that we can share from that, and the re-emergence of a 93-year-old man to lead our country. And if you're talking about Asian leadership agenda, this is a major significant change for Malaysia, ASEAN, probably Asia in terms of geopolitical, as well as corporate culture. There are sweeping changes that are taking place in the corporate arena. Not only the government sector change of personalities, but also we are seeing change of corporate leadership. So this is a significant difference as compared to the other countries. Man who ruled the country for 22 years is back, and the leadership style is completely different. It's very inclusive, very democratic, very forward-looking, and it is refreshing. And I think it's also giving a lot of refreshment to the corporate sector, which has been largely living off the benevolence of a government. And it's trickling down. The impact now on corporate, then the impact on SMEs. So leadership challenges are there. And I think that it also could make some changes across our borders to some small island. It's under a bit of challenge to be more democratic. So it's refreshing, it's exciting. I'm here to share some experiences post and post the elections and the leadership change that has taken place.
Yes. Thank you so much. I will point out that I actually lied, and you were at the Bangkok meeting, weren't you?
That's right.
And we did meet each other, so I do know him. So
we shared
lies from me.
I believe they're telling a lot of lies. We shared a bus, I think, a couple of years.
Thank you very much. The things I'm picking up are that leadership isn't the prerogative of youth or age. It is a need to include everyone and to take everyone along with us. It needs to be inclusive. The last speaker on the panel, Frank, I could equally be cheeky, and because he's been ex of everything. He's an ex-banker, an ex-hedge fund managing partner. I hate to think what other exes he has been, but he's also slightly mad, or at least investing in Slightly Mad Studios in Singapore. And you're looking daggers at me, Frank.
I'm looking flabbergasted, I'm joking. No, the company deserves its name. It's a video gaming company, and it's basically, I'm an entrepreneur and investor, and I'm with the company now for a couple of years. And I would like to share my experience since I have been living and working in Asia for over 25 years in several roles. And Richard, I would like to bring a slightly different aspect to this discussion. If I go back to what you mentioned initially when you provided the context to this discussion, you talked about the more orthodox view of Western neoliberalism and competition, which seems to be in a gridlock currently, and I would agree to that. And you oppose that to the sort of more communitarian mindset of Asian cultures, and asked whether the Asian societies are ready for a new paradigm where society basically would be put before commercial self-interest. I would like to give a slightly more optimistic view about leadership, perhaps a more pragmatic view, and talk about some of the lessons that we can learn from the West, or some of the items that we can pick and apply that to leadership here in Asia. So I believe there are certain solutions, or at least there are elements that we can actually look toward too. First of all, when we talk about capitalism, the way we know it today, or the way it is being executed and described, is very different from the kind of capitalism that I grew up with. I come from a small country in Europe, Luxembourg, which is in the middle of Western Europe, in between Germany, France, and Belgium. And when I grew up, we had two major blocks in Europe. We had basically the Eastern Bloc with Russia dominance. We had the Western societies. And somehow in most of the Western societies at that time, we had something which is called social democracy, which is still prevailing at this very moment in time. And it functions very well in a number of European countries, somehow in most, even if you have changes of leadership. And it is basically characterized by a commitment to policies aiming at curbing inequality, oppression of underprivileged groups, and poverty. And I believe that that specific framework, we could talk probably all day about it, serves as an excellent framework from which we can borrow ideas to apply to this Asian paradigm, and how we can actually sort of bridge the divides between the various parameters here in Asia. And when I say social democracy, I'm not even saying this is a universal welfare state. But I can bring it up one notch, and I would talk about the so-called Nordic model, where you have a real, true welfare state in the Scandinavian countries, where you basically have comprehensive welfare for everyone. You have a collective bargaining model, and that has served these countries very well. So if I take 1 and 2, or 1 or 2, this blend of what I would call capitalist economics with social values is most certainly an alternative to the excesses of capitalism, which has really morphed into an engine of inequality, to be honest, in a lot of jurisdictions, especially when you look at the United States and you look at the gap between the 1% and the 99% of the population. There is a lot of inequality there that is not prevalent in these other economies. And if I take it one notch higher and I just move away from the world of money, and I look at happiness. If you take those very countries that have this type of policies, they're also the happiest countries in the world. I don't know which kind of parameters I use to measure that, but the UN gives every year, they issue a World Happiness Report, and you have Finland, Denmark, Iceland, all these countries, they really sort of top the list consistently. So I think these guys, they must be doing something right, and I think we should be looking towards them to take some of their ideas. So the real question then really is for a leader, can we have economic growth and prosperity alongside social cohesion? A little bit the best of all worlds. Now, traditional wisdom would suggest that this is not possible, while it is also true, if you look historically, that economic competition has always dominated the agenda. But when I look specifically at Asia, and you cannot sort of say there is one Asia, I mean, there are many different countries here, but there's generally in Southeast Asia, when I look at Thailand, Vietnam, countries with a lot of population, a lot of young populations, I think there are different ground rules that apply this time. And I'm hopeful. First of all, most of the economies here, compared to when we talk about capitalism in the Western world, they come from a significantly lower base. Number two, most of the governments here in Asia, they apply a much more authoritarian regime. And it is much easier to push through policies than it is in the West. we also have a significantly larger, younger population in Asia. I believe in Vietnam, about 50% of the population is under 30 years old. So there is much to learn. There is an unbiased approach. And I think that there is a lot I think we can take and give to this young population. And then also I think that there is the benefit now that we can understand and learn from the West, from the mistakes that were previously or are still being done. And there is an effect that the larger the gap between the rich and the poor, the less cohesive a society is. So we should not make, or leaders, a good leader should not make the same mistake. I say that while at the same time I believe that you cannot simply take a recipe from the West and then sort of deploy it to the East, but nonetheless I think there is a lot of stuff that we can actually learn from. So to conclude on that, I think that what a good leader should do, or what the policy should be, is that we should have a specific agenda and specific dedicated policies on social cohesion, sort of to make sure that we're able to sort of bridge that divide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you're quite correct in correcting me that not all in the West is bad. And the Nordic model in particular is something which I find really quite interesting and intriguing from a theoretical point of view as well, because if those of you who are knowledgeable in terms of the evolution of human development would see that those Scandinavian countries appear to be at a higher level of evolution than a lot of other countries in the world, particularly if you look, unfortunately, at a continent like Africa, for example. So there are very great lessons, I think, we can learn from that in terms of it not just being economics that matter to people, it's other things like social cohesion and culture. That's it from the panel. Anything that the panel wants to say to each other before we open it to other people to question or challenge or ask questions that we've heard amongst ourselves?
Yeah. So I want to ask one more point. Mentoring is also a kind of a leadership that I'm aiming to nurture in Vietnam. So in order as to be a good mentor, that person should be the one that can empathize with their peers, and they should learn to listen with attention. So most of us listen, but we put our attention we are here physically, but our mind mentally is somewhere else. So the hardest part is that if we can listen with attention, we can figure out that the root cause of the problem, and then we can solve the conflict. And that's how we can influence the person that we are talking to. So, and influence is a really good tool of a leader can spread their impact. And that's how collaboration is formed. That's how the new project gonna be formed, and that's how we can have new partnership.
I agree with that, and also learning. I've been a mentor for about 15 years. I've mentored heads of state, cabinet ministers, CEOs, entrepreneurs, some extraordinary people. And the thing that's most obvious to me is that I've learnt more from them than they have from me. So, yeah. I mean, I think that learning is very important, which is why I framed that for this session as well. Anything else the panel wants to say to each other? No?
No.
We will open it to the floor. Are there any questions or comments or observations or entirely new ideas from people?
I happen to be your namesake. I'm also Richard, but I'm I'm Richard Rekhi. I'm from India, and I think the discussions were pretty good. We got very different facets of leadership. I would just like to supplement a few points. One of the new, or at least in my view, something that is coming up for a lot of corporations and for a lot of individuals is something called the higher purpose. What is it that, why are you into something? We have heard people saying, okay, how do we motivate? How do we inspire? But what is your higher purpose? Why? What is that glue that will bind an organization to move in a particular direction? The why of your life. And what will inspire people to continue to stay in that organization, or clients or customers, suppliers to work for that. The second one on mentoring, I completely agree. Empathy is something that is lacking in a lot of leaders today. I think another big deficit that is coming, one is seeing, is this trust deficit. When we are all this fake news, going on repeating the same lie again and again till you convince everybody that that's the truth, new story, new history getting written. This is one of the downsides of social media. We are seeing it getting played out actually. And we have to see how leaders can become more responsible and ensuring that they bring the world together and not in that. The third point, when you spoke about mentoring, I think I would just like to add one thing. Considering that mentoring gets done across generations, what do you think of reverse mentoring? What does the people in this room want to think of reverse mentoring? You're mentoring somebody who may be younger to you or very different in the hierarchy. What about learning something from him? Because today we are living in an age which is disrupted by technology. And I would not say technology so much. Technology is only an enabler. My view is the dreams of what you can do with technology, or how you can take it and make it work. And I would feel, so reverse mentoring is something also I would consider. These are a few points. And one more last point I would like to say. You said it about inclusive growth, how your new leader in Malaysia is working towards an inclusive, and few years later we will see what the impact of that is going to be. GDP is looked as a growth for a country's, and country's success is counted by GDP. Has GDP outlived its form in its current form? Or do we need to add social parameters to it to actually merit and bridge that social divide that is taking place in society, which doesn't get measured, gets measured separately, so you'll have a UN report coming on this, UN report, but it's not coming as a wholesome report and saying how a country is performing. So these are a few of my observations.
There's such useful comments. Thank you so much. That latter point particularly, it's interesting that so many politicians around the world are focusing, as they should, on growth. And yet most of them are pushing in the wrong direction in terms of growth. In other words, they're only thinking of more growth in a finite world where more growth is going to see the extinction of our species by the turn of the next century. And it's a pity we don't realize that, and pity we don't grapple with the truth. But I was particularly interested in what you were saying around empathy and, well, the higher purpose obviously, but the empathy. And it relates to something else that this guy, Nick Gowing, in interviewing CEOs and politicians particularly, came up with. And it was brought home to me recently because we were schooling our 7-year-old son in Melbourne in a Steiner school. He was there for 3 years, and the last 18 months he was being bullied totally every day. He developed really a fear of going to school. And like me, he's lived with autism his 7 years. I've lived with it for 73 years, but he couldn't deal with it. He's too gentle. He wouldn't hit back or anything like that. So I started investigating and researching bullying, and was speaking to Nick Gowing. And apparently, according to Gowing's research, if you look at all the incumbent CEOs, the leading CEOs around the world, perhaps almost 60% of them are sociopathic bullies. And that's not just men, that's women as well, who are CEOs. That's extraordinary that we allow bullying to develop out of a lack of empathy, and especially in Asia, where you get so many different cultures and so much latent racism that leads then to a lack of empathy and then bullying. And what we're doing is creating bullies in our incumbent leaders. How is that? How is that not stupid? So thank you very much for your comments. There was another one just here, and it's Boy.
Just a fast one because I'm a Dane, so I just want to comment on the Nordic model, which I'm not quite sure we should copy and go around with. And let me give you the warning signs here. We do not have leadership. We have something called collective leadership. And I'm not sure that's adaptable around the world. We are small communities, but our Prime Minister gets, and now you get scared, he gets $200,000 a year in salary, and that's taxable. And he gets around 20% of that in pension when he resigns or gets off the board, and he doesn't have any special rules or rights. A agreeable bonus for a group CEO in our country is capped at $2 million US. If people get more than that, it is socially unacceptable. The people I've seen in government in South Asia that I met, a lot of the distinguished gentlemen, they're all getting, their pockets are getting full. And for them to be accepting collective leadership, I think it's going to be very difficult, a very, very long journey out here, even though I would love it to come here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Although that does tie in with one of the things I said in the context originally. Does anyone want to respond to the potential for collective leadership in essentially communitarian societies? Down there, sorry, I will come to you in a minute. Yes, white jacket. White jacket, black hair.
Yeah, my name is Anil Bhaskaran. I am from Bangalore, India. I am an architect and urban planner scheduled to talk tomorrow in smart cities. Today's subject on leadership, I just wanted to add to what Richard was saying. You were saying on inclusiveness and empathy. I think when you talk about leadership of today and tomorrow, we need to include the planet and the other creatures as well. Because when we are talking about leading only the human beings, I think that may not be adequate today, because it is estimated that the biodiversity of this planet will be completely lost in the next 50 years. The fact you just touched upon that topic when you spoke about empathy. I think we need to look at leadership that can lead the planet, the other creatures of the planet, because if we are going to lose the biodiversity, then what are we going to lead eventually? Because we won't have human beings left on this planet in any case. So I just wanted to add that point. Thank you.
It's a very valid point, particularly applicable given the domination of the Western worldview. In terms of worldview, I want to distinguish between worldview and mindset. Worldview is the tacit understanding we have of how the world generally works, that we all adhere to in one sense or another, whereas the different mindsets we all have individually, but we develop group mindsets because of where we grow up and how we're conditioned. And your coming from India is very pertinent in that respect, because the Indic mindset is almost the reverse of the Occidental mindset in how you treat other creatures. Yes. And in the West, it's always been the scriptures of the West have always told us that we can dominate the earth and eat everybody, except other humans. Whereas India, that Indic mindset, that doesn't have that at all, I'm not sure. Perhaps the Hindic scriptures do, I'm not sure. Perhaps I've tripped over myself there totally. Perhaps we need to rewrite scripture. Just here.
Thank you, Richard, for bringing that the topic on bullying in the corporate sector, and Abha for bringing emotional intelligence in this leadership conversation. I am a leadership coach, and I especially we work in the area of emotional intelligence. And during my assessments of leaders, I've especially found that a lot of leaders actually lack an impulse control area. Perhaps is that, the sense of being powerful, sense of being in that position where they can say what they want, and the thing that the people who are, kind of under them, or they just have to listen to them. And that gives them that feeling of superiority and dominance. And instead of actually developing them, bringing them up, they just kind of get used to telling them what to do. And forgetting that success of a leader actually depends upon, of course, the success of the people that they lead. So this is something, emotional intelligence is probably one of the key areas that we should be looking at when we are talking about leadership. And then, Richard, again, you brought up the topic of purpose. I mean, unless people really agree with the purpose that a leader is striving for, and also the values that they demonstrate during their journey as a leader. And the purpose comes from the stories that people live by. And when people see a leader's story as a very inspiring story, and they truly get inspired by what they do and how they behave and what the values that they live by, I think those are the people who people just like to follow. And nowadays, especially with our personal space constantly being encroached by our professional space, I mean, we're carrying our mobile phones all the time, and we're just like a call or a message away. So, I think getting involved more with people, their desires, their dreams, their goals, what drives them, what moves them, how to, get to know them, and connecting with them, not just by capitalism, of course, and money is an incentive. We all are there in the game of money, but what really brings in people is the people's heart. How much we touch their heart and how much we connect with their heart is what moves them. And in my view, that is leadership, when we touch other people's heart and just take them together.
Thank you so much. I mean, what you're saying is so interesting in terms of what are the major stories we hear in society at the moment. And everywhere, sorry Toshi, everywhere we hear about technology driving us towards the future. And it's the Internet of Things, and if it's not the Internet of Things, it's something else. It's all, the synchronicity, not synchronicity, what's that university?
Serendipity.
Sorry?
Is it serendipity? Serendipity, synchronicity?
Yes.
Singularity University.
Singularity University, yes.
Yes.
Singularity University, where, I mean, Ray Kurzweil, has everybody heard of Raymond Kurzweil?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Totally pursuing his own end because he wants to live at least until he's 150 years old, but very determined and deterministic that the future is just one thing, and that's that synergy between, or the connection between man and machine, humans and machine. It's for a lot of people, it's a very negative story to be hearing, and of course all the stories in our society at the moment don't really connect enough with heart. Part of the problem, I feel, I'm sorry I'm hogging the limelight, part of the problem I feel was the first feminist movement in the West where, like it or not, a lot of men felt after that, significant for women, but a lot of men were left questioning their own identity. And that's no laughing matter. Sorry, that's no laughing matter. What we need today is a new kind of feminism, if you like, that applies to us all, yes. Men and women. Perhaps people, not men and women. Did you want to respond to the emotional intelligence?
Yes, what I'm trying, I think a question that comes up, like when you say West and East, I mean, it's not one against the other. It's not everything is bad and everything is good. How do we get it together? That's the point. And in my experience of working in the West as well as in the East, and being Indian and living in Indonesia and working through all parts of Asia, I think one word that has struck my mind completely, and which resonates with every person I've met mentored, coached, and spoken to, and all the leaders is the word. And in this book, I'm called a growth activist, and I think the word growth is the word that puts all of us together in one place. Because when we talk about growth, I mean, we are not going to give up capitalism, we are not going to give up money, but we are not supposed to give up ourselves either. And when we are talking of that, growth is one word that allows us to grow personally, grow financially, grow socially, grow together, and grow in every. So growth somehow gives us a framework in which we can talk to each other and accept what's going on. Ask what's good about you, what can I pick up from you, what can I take from you, what can I share with you? And that's the way it works. And especially in Asia, now that we are opening up to the idea of leadership, I think what works, because there is going to be competition, we can't escape that. There's going to be money, we can't escape that. So let's talk about growth and meritocracy. Can we get up and say we are working on merit? Can we get up and say that I understand growth and I understand how it works? Can we put some values to it and say, okay, this is how it works, because we talked about higher purpose, we talked about happiness, we talked about social cohesion. Where do we put it together? So this is one word I believe that can bring all of us together and put us in the same place and understand how we can fuse both the cultures and both sides of the world and see what we can get out of it. And like you use the word transcend, it's not plural, it's going to cross that path and go to a universal place, and that universal place is growth. Can we talk about growth in a normal way? Can we incorporate that in our lives? Can we incorporate that in our work? Can we incorporate that in our families? Can we incorporate that on an occasion of bullying? Can we incorporate that when you say that the leaders can stand up and say what they want to say? And can we ask them to understand what empathy means? Because that's against a humble leader. That's what, when we are learning leaders, we are also supposed to be humble, right? So I think this is one of the words that I feel is a very powerful word. And I have personally used it in all my work. And it has worked, because we work around all these theories, but I plug in the element of growth in it. And so, okay, let's see how we can do this. And it works.
But Abba, also what you're saying is that the questions start internally, not externally in terms of growth.
See, the questions would be either external, but we have to connect them with the internal space as well.
Right.
We can't just say it's internal or external, because it's all combined, it's all one thing.
Yes.
So we can't say it's either or.
Okay.
So we have to start talking about it in that aspect. And one more thing I just wanted to mention, you talked about leadership literature. It's from the West, it's by the men. I have authored a book which is by women for women, and it's a bestseller book on women's leadership. So I'm being, you know.
Good. I wrote a book too, by accident.
Same here.
Declare yourself, declare your interest in this panel.
Yeah, I'm Subarna and I'm from India. And going back to one question that Richard asked out here about, a leader in a position of power and how can they retain employees in current situations. One thing that came to my mind, and while I was hearing everybody else, is a leader needs to know how to pass the baton. In the sense that while we are talking about motivating, inspiring, sometimes dominating and showing power, in all of these, we are creating executors or followers who can probably execute efficiently. But until and unless we as leaders know how to pass the baton to the next person and create the next generation of leader, pass on empathy, enable decision making, I do not think that we will be able to, one, retain the executors or to scale up opportunities. In the sense, efficiency grows, but for scaling, we need new leaders, and that can only happen from a mentorship space.
Thank you very much. Yes, the importance of youth can't be underestimated.
Hi, my name is Senartus Sosrojoyo. I'm from Indonesia, and I know there's a couple of Indonesians in this room, so this might perhaps struck a chord. We've talked a lot about what makes a good leader. We talk about growth and everything, which probably comes naturally for a company. One thing that I've noticed so far in terms of being a leader, especially from where I'm from, is the sense of entitlement. It's a sense of entitlement that, in my opinion, kind of breaks the whole synergy within a company and within a nation. For example, a CEO which has better benefits more than anyone else in the company. We've actually started to do a little bit of a social experiment in our company where everyone gets the same health benefit, including myself as a CEO. But that's also obviously a lot easier for a smaller company than it is for a larger company. But the reason why I wanted to do that is I wanted to test myself. Am I willing to basically put myself through to the same experience as my workers? So, but the other hand that in Indonesia that I feel a bit disgusted about is a sense of entitlement within, the big, powerful people and the politicians, etc. For example, Jakarta is a heavily trafficked area. I mean, at points in time, it's not rare to see policemen patrolling, guarding certain people, certain high officials. And that is something that's just, in my opinion, a lot of people are disgusted about that, but at the same time, they're not willing to speak out about it because of fear. And that's something that, in my mind, until leaders will really accept in terms of a sense of entitlement that has to be toned down. I'm not saying that CEOs should be paid the same as a lower level person, but I'm saying is that there should be a maximum in terms of the kind of entitlement that goes on in society-wise.
Yes. Thank you very much. I mean, we all, I know, in our lives, we come across people from time to time that we look up to, and you think, well, that's a real leader there. For me, it was my first meeting with Nelson Mandela, and the thing that struck me about Mandela was that higher purpose was certainly there, no doubt about that, but he was racked with doubts, which he didn't let out to other people, but doubts about his own capabilities, doubts about whether he had the right even to be where he was, doing what he was. And that to me was extraordinary, that for me, such a leader was so humble and so ready to forgive his jailers.
Hi, my name is Preet and I'm from India as well. Actually, what I wanted to add to what you're saying is the word is vulnerability. As a leader, are you actually bold enough to show that you're vulnerable, because you're human. And every human in whatever position is vulnerable. And when a leader actually is not afraid to show vulnerability, is not afraid to show emotion, that is also a way to connect. That really shows the person, in their true form, and not at a position of power necessarily.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear. Were you talking about showing fragility or vulnerability?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Yes. Thank you.
Can I?
Again.
Okay. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Preeti, and I'm from Singapore, an Indian, of course. The question of empathy. So whenever we do these leadership assessments, a lot of leaders, they just say, empathy, isn't that a weakness? I mean, if I start empathizing with people, then they wouldn't even listen to me. And salespeople, sales leaders, they think if I start empathizing with the client, then I can't sell. So there is a lot of, confusion about topics like being vulnerable and being empathetic. It's being open-hearted, it's being accepting, showing yourself and accepting other people, and that's what creates the real connection. Because leadership is, after all, about influence. It's about inspiring others. It doesn't happen unless you connect with them in that sense. So I'm very glad that you brought this topic of vulnerability here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one story about the empathy. So anyone here in our room blend vegetable at home? Blend vegetable at home for food or blend tree? So the story here is when you plant a vegetable or plant a tree, if your tree or vegetable die, what you gonna do? You plant the tree or vegetable, or you plant, okay, maybe we put less water, or the earth is dry, or we put a lot, or we didn't put the water, we didn't water our vegetable or tree. So basically, we don't question the tree or the vegetable itself. We question what factor that affect the tree or the vegetable. So the story of empathy here is that if our partner or our employee perform terribly or something wrong with them, do we find them or we find what factor that affect them perform wrong like that? So that's if we can find what actually influence or affect him or her, we can find a solution, and that's how we can empathize and we can nurture a future leader.
Thank you.
Richard,
So,
can I-
yes,
sorry. Why leaderships fail? Entitlement. Leaderships fail because of the feeling of entitlement. So you get divorced from the realities of your workers, your people, the staff, number one. Entitlement also breeds arrogance. And arrogance breeds completely, you can walk on water, you can walk on air, and complete disconnect with the mass. And this is what eventually leadership will pay that price. You would not have imagined a CEO or a chairman of a company understating his income to a tune of 300 million, right? It's entitlement, arrogance. That's the failures of leadership. Leadership tend to look at what's in it for me rather than what's in it for the growth, what's in it for the people. So markets will correct and markets will punish. However long it takes, it will come and bite you. Leaders need to understand. For example, Malaysia went through this thing about inclusiveness, etc. and all that. And we have minimum wage, right? So the minimum wage moves up. But the disparity between the leader and the minimum wage doesn't change. It's 56 times. And what are you going to get out of your workers if you have that kind of disparity? So this is what the new leadership is looking at and saying, if you want inclusiveness, leaders need to bring themselves down to earth and keep that gap manageable. A lot of leaders, and this is when bullying comes in. The entitlement is also about, hey, I am the leader. It's my right. It's nobody's right to question. Yes. And that brings, it's another form of bullying.
Yes.
And you take care of yourself. So there's got to be major reforms in this.
Yes.
If not, leadership gets to run away.
Yes. That's also, of course, that point is tied into the design of systems, because the design of the economic system we have at the moment within an extractive paradigm is widening the gap that we see between the wealthy and the poor. And that's a real problem in itself. We have covered so much ground. I've learnt so much, so thank you all for this. We've covered the fact that we live in a pluriverse, not a universe. We can transcend opposites if we have a mind to. Sharing, humility, empathy, cooperation, inclusivity, and social cohesion are all important for leadership. Women need to play an equal role, not a lesser role, and young people particularly. But it's not about just one group or another. It's about everyone pulling together. It's about, perhaps if we're really serious about designing an agenda of leadership for Asia, we need to go back to first principles, which means the various cultures and aspirations that we all have. And we have, in the distance, but perhaps wavering, according to Boy, is that Nordic model that we might take notice of or not, and look for other models as well. I really want to thank you that these themes have been consistent throughout our discussion. And particularly the idea that leaders make contributions to other people's lives. They don't just feather their own nests. For me, simply by showing up and contributing to this session, even if you've sat in silence and listened intently, whoever it was here who said, listen intently, You've contributed to our lives. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone has. I hope we can all go away with at least one idea that will continue, if not to keep us awake at night, at least thinking about possibility and changing who we are and what we do. I'd like to thank each member of the panel, because it's a fantastic panel, thank you so much, and for every person in this room for making this such an informative and inspiring 90 minutes. Thank you very much. Take care, keep in touch, keep leading, and above all, continue to make the best of this meeting. Thank you so much.
Very good idea.